So welcome, everybody, to the second hour of Mindshifters Radio. Today is Monday, January the 3rd, 2022, and our call-in number is 563-999-3581, and press 1, and that puts you into queue to talk to us. We'd love to hear your comments and questions because that makes this your show. Maybe raise a hand and let us know how your leaving of 2021 and your entry into 2022, how it went, and let us know what you were grateful for. How are you starting your new year? Give Michael just a moment to get dialed in. I'll invite you to go to our website, which is whyagain.org, whyagain.org, and just look around. There's lots of things that have changed. If you haven't downloaded the app, it's Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness, and it's free in either the Google Play Store or the Apple Store, either one. And this coming Saturday, January the 8th, is our next Mind Shifters and Still Point Breathing. It's also, Michael will be in the Coptic Conference. Information on both of those is also on our website under events. It's also under schedule. So look at that. Let us know if you're interested. We're actually in the Smoky Mountains right now, and we had about 6 inches of snowfall last night. So I know that our granddaughter, Adeline, is going to be so excited because she wanted to go skiing. So we're waiting on them to arrive today. Michael J. and his family arrived 2 days ago. And I got here yesterday, so we're all just kind of straggling in. I see Michael's with us now, so I'm going to say welcome, Michael. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, dear heart, and welcome, everybody. Honored, delighted that you're here. It's theoretically, at least, a new year. The opportunity to create life anew, to move forward into something different if we're really willing and ready to do our work. And unfortunately, at this point, it seems like a lot of people aren't really wanting to look at, face, and deal with what's going on inside of them, and so keep the focus on the outer world. Our invitation with this work is to make a shift, is to move to a different place in life where we're willing to perhaps give up some of the desires of the mind and get back to the truth of who we are as human beings. And, you know, the false mind has a skill at building a case for anything that it chooses to engage in. And what we're looking to do is to get back to the real mind, to get back to the truth of who we are as human beings. And one of the difficult pieces of doing that is, well, actually, the song title that goes along with this particular set of thoughts. You might remember a few decades ago there was a song out there that said, "I can't get no satisfaction." And of course, the world of music is definitely tends to be the world of excess and tends to leave people stuck in a cycle of addiction. And you look at the addiction that the entertainment world is so famous for, and yet not understanding the difference the difference between satisfaction and satiation that song points to. You know, we can be satiated, and if we're satiated, it means we need more of what it is that we think we want. Well, wait a minute, Michael, if I'm satiated, why would that be? Well, it's interesting. What research is showing is that when we achieve a goal and get something that we want, we experience a temporary dopamine hit that feels like elation. And when we're stuck in that cycle, when dopamine is a thing, we achieve a goal, you get a dopamine hit. Achieve a goal, you get a dopamine hit. And that arena, as far as the mind goes, is an arena of diminishing returns. Because when we overload and overuse that dopamine, let's say cocaine, the way people get high from cocaine is it causes the body to use up its dopamine supplies. The happy powder is gone. And when those receptor sites are activated over and over and over again, the body automatically starts to cut off those receptor sites, reduce the number that are there, and when the number of receptor sites are reduced, we need more of whatever it was that produced that high, that sensation that we can never get enough of. More, because it comes from that dopamine, but it's diminishing returns because the body shuts that down when we overload it. On the other hand, the real presence of joy comes from connectedness, not satiation. One can find both joy and or sensation in, let's say, for instance, a relationship. One will tend to lead to a degrading, destructive relationship, satiation. Got to have more, can't get enough. Let's say it's in the arena of sex. Got to have more, can't get enough, want more, can't get enough. Receptor sites are paring down, takes more to get even the slightest hit, and it leads to addiction. On the other hand, exactly the same. It's got nothing to do with what's happening in the physical world. It's got to do with what's happening in the mind. All of the same events, second for second, minute for minute, the same events can happen in an intimate relationship. And if rather than satiation and looking for pleasure, which is the dopamine hit, the world of diminishing returns, if that's what one's looking for is pleasure, then the body's going to cut, shut down, and it takes more and more and more, and that is what leads to addiction. And of course, addiction means I have more goals. When I have more goals, I've got more stress. When my stress level goes up, I move from my normal personality into a power person dynamic, and I'll start to do the behaviors in order to try to get my quote-unquote needs fulfilled. I'll do the behaviors my power person did that I hated the most, and things become insane. Everything can be absolutely, if you were an observer, everything in the scene looks exactly the same, but if that sexual relationship comes from connectedness and the presence of love rather than sensation and satiation, then it leads to deepening aliveness, joy, and creativity because it works at different chemicals in the brain they're showing. Instead of dopamine, which comes from that driving, I need a sensation, I need pleasure to be pleasured, wanting more and more and more of it, the hedonistic type of approach. Exactly the same physical action. When it is connectedness in the presence of love in a relationship, creates that state of joy because it's now serotonin that's active in the brain. Totally and completely different process going on. And that becomes a relationship that leads to, instead of the downward spiral, leads to the upward spiral of aliveness, of joy, of creativity. So and you go back to the origins, the original words in the book of John that we're told say, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh. In Aramaic, it doesn't say that. It says in the beginning was the mind energy, and the mind energy became flesh. And that desire out of some form of hostility or fear or need to get my needs met greed, got to have more, leads to mind energy that creates this dopamine cycle, that creates a downward spiral. When it comes from abundance, from being, from the actual state of aliveness, the actual state of being, and connectedness in relationship, and service in relationship, and willingness, that mind energy creates a serotonin loop that creates satisfaction, and it doesn't have to be a more driving type of process. And when you realize that the way to break the cycle when one's moving downward is through the use of forgiveness, that forgiveness is the key in changing this game, and that forgiveness weakens the patterns based in that dopamine cycle so that we can escape from that driving desire for something which we could label as greed. You know, you look at the person who wants more money, more sex, more power, bigger houses, bigger cars, more thrills, you know, more danger. It's all based in that pleasure cycle that I think those young musicians were singing about so brilliantly and several decades ago of, I can't get no satisfaction, because when you're in a dopamine cycle, you can't be satisfied. It's just not possible. And when you realize that that desire for pleasure is driven by goals, and when one moves into an addictive cycle, into addiction, that addiction is always a cover for some sort of pain. Underlying it is a need that is produced by, I have to find a way to cover this pain. I don't want to feel this. I don't want to deal with this. And through forgiveness, one gets to feel and deal with those energetic patterns and put an end to the addictive cycle, an end to the insanity of addiction. And, of course, to just cover it very simply, the word forgive in Aramaic doesn't mean I'm going to let you off the hook for what's happening inside of me, but rather that forgiveness is the recognition that those perceptual constructs in my mind that show up as my behavior prompts are caused or put into action, recruited into action through my goals. And when I can cancel, in the Aramaic language, the word that's been translated as forgive is shabag. It literally means to cancel, to let loose, to untie. When I can cancel or untie my attachment to, I have to have this, or that, then I can start to get out of that dopamine cycle where I want more of that hit of pleasure in order to cover my pain. Canceling of the goals that drive that process allow us to drop directly into our pain. Now, the average person says, oh, well, why would I ever want to drop in directly into my pain? I don't want to feel that. Well, the way out of that dilemma is through. You have to, sooner or later, be willing to deal with the underlying patterns and the underlying pain that drives addictive behavior, embrace it in love, and move through it. And what that requires is a huge chunk of self-discipline. And you remember the word disciple means properly taught, not properly beat up. Yeah, they can do behavior modification and people will change their behavior, but none of the underlying dynamics have been embraced and healed. So one of the steps in the interim, moving from pleasure-seeking and addiction to fulfillment and satisfaction, is that you've got to have enough self-discipline to stop doing what it is that you want to do once you realize that the behavior is not based in love. takes a tremendous amount of self-will and self-control to say, I feel like doing this, but I'm not going to do it because I realize that it doesn't serve me and it doesn't serve those around me. And at the same time, when you step up to the plate into doing some sort of service, then that service is another way to move out of the state of hostility or fear, to move back to the truth of who we are. And the truth of who we are, if we embrace what's actual, is that a human being is literally made of the energy of love. And until one can deny themselves the satiation that covers the presence of love, they'll never touch into the satiation and heal it. So we have this satiation versus satisfaction. And it's satiation that's the root of greed. And to refrain from what you feel like doing, it's the most unnatural thing that there is. It's one of the most powerful acts of self-control that there is. And as you shave away, as you remove, when that word forgive in our modern language, properly applied, means to undo, to remove. And each time you forgive, you literally, energetically weaken the pattern of the driving underlying pain that causes addiction, just step by step by step by step. Each time you engage in forgiveness, I think this is what led them to ask Yeshua, well, how many times do we need to forgive? How many times do we need to apply this forgiveness process? And they asked him, is 7 times enough? And in Aramaic, his answer was, no, 77 times 70. That's how many times one is going to forgive. And each time you do, you drop into a little deeper level, heal a little deeper piece of what the underlying dynamic is that drives the need for satiation. And if one, and this tends to be, in my observation, one of the most challenging things for people to do, oftentimes we'll see people that are driven to do this work when they're in pain, and as soon as their pain goes away, it's kind of part of that pleasure type thing. Well, now I've let go of my pain, so now I'm in relative pleasure. I don't need to do anything. One of the most challenging things to get people to do is to do their work when they're feeling good, rather than waiting till they're in the pit. It's kind of akin to the reason why salespeople get paid so much. You say, wait a minute, how do you make a leap from salespeople being paid so much to what it is? How do you make that leap? Well, one of the reasons sales are one of the most highly paid professions is because salespeople need to produce. They need to sell. And what oftentimes happens, the people who fail at sales are the people who can't apply self-control. One has a monthly target that they're supposed to reach in sales. And if they're not reaching that target, the tendency is to feel worse and worse and be in hostility and fear, be in seeking results, but not connected to a creative place in oneself. And so one goes out, the less they've met their quota for the month, the harder they drive to meet their quota, and the more they come from that hostility and fear place, and they tend to fail. And when they hit the high point, when they're feeling good and things are rocking, it's not human nature to say, well, now I'm going to go to work and do my job and do the sales that I need, get the sales target met for this month. If the first 2 weeks of the month, I'm feeling pretty good, I'm rocking. Well, I can play, and the real salesperson, when they're feeling good, knows that's the time to go to work because they're in creative mode and they can produce those results. Where the person who is not going to make it in sales says, oh man, I'm not making it, push, I have to push harder, I have to produce the result, and they're working against their own best interest. So the similarity here is that when you're not up against the wall, that's the time to do the forgiveness work that you need to do. When it feels like you don't need it, that's the time. When you're in a connected high place, that's when you can do the deepest levels of work. But many people, like the salesperson that's going to fail, wait until they're at the bottom of the pit and then say, well, now I need to climb my way out of the pit. Please, if you're going to take these tools and use them especially when you're feeling good, especially when you don't need to use them. Because that's when you'll be at the highest levels of empowerment, the highest levels of vitality, the highest levels of creativity, and that's when you'll be able to produce the healing result that you want. Instead of waiting until you're at the bottom of the pit and going, oh, I have this horrible thing going on in my life, I need to climb out of this hole. And I've just watched so many people over the years who become acquainted with this work. I remember talking to a man recently, and he'd been involved with this work for over 3 decades. And he'd come back every time he was in pain. He'd go, yeah, okay, I hear it, I got it, yeah, I'll do it. And then would just disappear, not do his work, until he was against the next big crisis in his life, and he's like, well, yeah, now I need help, now support me, now I'm going to do my work. And sadly, in this gentleman's case, and I've seen it in too many other cases, he's at the point, after 30 years of dancing around it and not really engaging in it when he was on his game, he's dealing with some very serious physical symptoms, disease processes. He's like, yeah, now I want to do my work. Now I'm motivated, but motivated from the pit. It's not where you want to do your work. You want to do your work when you're at your highest, when you're at your most connected, when things are rocking and doing well. That's when to connect with other people who are rocking and doing well and do worksheets and move through those layers. And by the way, if you're not using the forgiveness worksheet process, we invite you to go to our website, whyagain.org. And if you go to the upper left-hand corner, you'll see a link that says Start Here, and it'll walk you right through the whole forgiveness process. You can also print off the worksheets from the website. You can do them live, the worksheets live on the website, print your completed results off, and or you can go to your app store on your phone and type in the words Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness. You're going to find the world's only forgiveness app, created by Miss Jeannie. Thank you for the brilliant work that you've done on that app, honey. I just this last iteration, I think, is just so exciting. The way it's laid out and the amount of information that's accessible to people, the utility of it, the fact that people can ask questions. I mean, it's awesome what you've created there. And it's such a profound gift to the world. So just go to your app store and type in Heartland, Heartland, one word, Aramaic, Aramaic, forgiveness. Download the app. It's a purposely very, very private app. If you look, you'll notice that when you download it, it asks, like all apps do, for permission. And it only asks for one permission, and that is to be able to use the internet so it'll operate. It doesn't ask for permission to make phone calls or use your camera or send text or access your contacts. It doesn't ask for any of those permissions that so many apps ask for. One thing, be able to use the internet. If you do a worksheet and you want to save it, which we suggest you do because they are gold. In the future, there'll be new layers of healing available from virtually every worksheet that you do, new levels of insight when you go back and look at it with a different mindset. When you ask to save, or when you tell it to save a worksheet that you've done, it is going to ask for one more permission. That is the ability to write to your hard drive. Otherwise, there are no permissions required from the app. So you can rest assured, anything you want to put in it, you're the only one that will ever be able to see it. Put the app to work. There's a new feature that Jeannie put in this last iteration where you can just click a button. And if you have a question, you're in step 3 and you go, well, I don't quite understand how this works. Click the button, write your question, hit send, and we will answer it on the next radio show and send you an email back saying, at 2:12 on Tuesday the 12th, we answered your question. So you'll have access to that discussion. So download the app, put it to work, and if this is making sense to you, if this is working in your life, who do you know that doesn't have tools? There's a section in the book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? It's the life without tools. And the bottom line conclusion is that life without tools is hell. And life with tools and not using the tools is hell. It's what it ultimately leads to. And so download the app, put it to work. You can access meditations there. You can access videos, audios, schedules, workshops. It's all in the app now. And so put it to work in your world, and we're here to create support. We'd love to hear what your experiences are. How did using the app or how did using the worksheet impact you last year? And or what's on your agenda for this year? How can we support you? What's on your mind? Our call-in number, if you're on one of those stations where we can't see you in our program, in our control panel, our call-in number is 563-999-3581. If you call that number, you'll be listening to the show. And then if you push 1, that will raise a hand in the control panel. Jeannie will know you want to talk to us, and we'll be having a conversation. So if you're out there in listener land, what's on your mind? How can we support you? Ms. Jeannie, do we have anybody in the phone queue with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room?
It is all quiet on this end. So someone press 1. We got 31 minutes.
Half an hour for conversation. What's on your mind?
A hand just went up, I believe.
Oh, great.
It's Miss Susan, 610. You're on the air.
Hi, guys. I wanted to hear a report of how your dad is, Jeannie, and how your trip is. And your brother's with your dad now, so you're free to be up or down or wherever you went. I forget where you went.
Actually, we headed over to the Smokies. We've had this vacation scheduled for months. And Michael got here Saturday, and his son, Michael J., got here on Saturday. And then I came yesterday on Sunday, and his daughter's going to arrive today. And
nice.
Yeah, it's beautiful. We woke up yesterday we were in short sleeves. Woke up this morning with 6 to 8 inches of snow on the ground. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Love it. That's
great.
The kids were
70
looking
degrees
forward
here
to
yesterday.
Yeah. So the kids are really excited about snow skiing. So that's awesome. Perfect week for it. And as far as Dad goes, no, my brother's not with him until towards the end of this week, but my son and stepson are taking turns going by there. But I spoke to the physical therapist this morning, and I told him, that I felt like Dad had taken, 4 steps backwards over the weekend. And he called me back after he had worked with him, and he agreed that Dad had declined. So I'm actually going to look at moving him to another facility because I think they basically just left him laying all weekend because it was the holiday and there weren't therapists coming in or anything. And It just undid everything that they had done last week. So it's really
that's awesome.
Brings up some frustration.
I bet. So you don't have to wait till you feel badly to do a worksheet. You're getting invitations. Oh, gee. Well, it's good to have a report. And you're both away and you're doing the radio show. This blows my mind, your loyalty to this show. No matter where you are, I could say come hell or high water, but that's not exactly.
Come heaven or high water.
Still. Okay, good. That's good. So, Michael, you said something really provocative. You said don't wait till you go down the tubes to do the worksheet.
Right.
And, of course, we probably all find it hard to crank up to do a worksheet when things are going well. Maybe other people are different, but I think, well, it's nice. I don't need one today, and I don't do them if I don't need them. And you're saying we got to do them like morning meditation. You do a worksheet or two.
You do a piece of work every day, and you're not going to have to get to the bottom of the pit. You know, it's kind of like you don't have to be sick to get better. And a lot of people wait till they're sick. And, of course, you know, if you're down at the bottom of the hill, it's a whole lot harder to push the truck up the hill than if from the top of the hill you started pushing and you know, made it through that dip. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, there's a cute story that I don't know, you may have heard me tell it before, but about motivation. It's about a guy who works at a factory, and between his house and the factory there's a graveyard. And he works night shift, but he's worked there so long, and he knows the people in the graveyard, and he knows the graveyard well. So, you know, he just crosses, even though it's dark, to work every night. And this one night he's on his way back, and unbeknownst to him, there's a fresh grave that's been dug, and he falls into the hole. And it's so deep that he can't, you know, he struggles, he tries, he climbs the dirt, he's falling, and finally just decides, well, I'm going to go to sleep. I know the guys, you know, when the guys come in the morning, they'll get me out of here. So he curls up in the corner of the grave and falls asleep. Well, about an hour later, a drunk comes stumbling through the graveyard and falls into the same grave. And the guy wakes up and realizes there's somebody in the grave, and he says, hey, buddy, now that you're in here, you can't get out. But the drunk did. It's called motivation. And you know, we don't have to be in a pit to say, I think I'll do a piece of work. You know, I can be in just the same way. And I'm glad you put that thought out of meditation. Why do people meditate every day? I mean, gee, I feel good. Why should I meditate? Because it's a way of maintaining a state of higher level homeostasis. And in exactly the same way, if I'll do my work, whether I'm in the pit or I'm up on top of the world, I've got more vitality, I've got more power, I've got more an ability to reach into depth and clear things out than I do when I'm at the bottom of my vitality. And so, you know, it takes a certain level of awareness and intelligence and choice to say, all right, that makes sense. I'm going to discipline myself and just make this part of my routine the same way as I meditate every day. That's what I'm going to do, you know. And to me, when people get that, it just makes life a whole lot easier if they'll keep moving through the work and the process, you know. Okay, so I'm not feeling this upset about Bill over there, but I know I still have some upset about Bill, so I'm going to do a worksheet on Bill today, or what have you.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. You said something you've said many times, that some issues don't come up for you until your vitality is cranked up enough that these issues are now safe to be addressed.
Exactly.
Which is a little bit of a different angle. But Tim Bingham and I have been going for walks, and we often talk about what we're working on in our personal growth department. And
right.
He had an issue that came up that hasn't been in his face and since he was kind of forced to retire way back before we moved down to Pennsylvania. And one reason we came down here is because he felt so terribly about this whole city was the place where he had worked, and he was afraid of running into people on the street and having to explain himself and seeing familiar faces and feeling so badly about the end of his lawyerly career up there, which I won't go into, but all of a sudden he had a nightmare, which was similar to a nightmare he had the night before he resigned from his job up there, his lawyerly position up there. And I remembered what you said, and I said, maybe you're vital enough to be facing this now. Maybe you're strong enough from the work you've been doing. And he said, maybe, but he had a major question, and so I'm going to leak right over into the question, if it's okay with you.
Great. Absolutely.
Okay, and the question is, his dream had to do with hell opening up and really demonic evil coming into his awareness, into his presence, and he was terrified and woke up scared. He said, that's exactly like the dream I had, however many years ago. It was probably almost 20 years ago. And he asked me, do you think evil exists apart from us? And, of course, that's a question we've been asking all along, but it seemed like a fresh, real question again. And my answer to him was, I like to act as if it's inside of me, because then it makes me responsible and in charge, and I can make choices. However, I don't know the answer to that, because with severe mental illness, for instance, whether caused by trauma or what, there is something demonic about certain kinds of mental illness where the person gets extremely ugly and destructive and dark. And I like to think that maybe they are possessed and there's something outside of them that could be exorcised in the old-fashioned sense of the word, and that they probably can't do it themselves. I guess I'm asking a question and a telling of all that, but I would love to know what you think about a separate evil. Does it exist?
Well, one of the things that Yeshua would say at this point is, that question's all Greek to me. So let's go back to the Aramaic mindset and see if we can adapt that, the Aramaic mindset rather than the Greek mindset, and recognize, first of all, you'll remember that the definition of sin in Aramaic, it's an archery term. When you fire at the target and you miss the bullseye, you're still on the target, but you miss the bullseye. The scorekeeper yells sin. And if you miss the target altogether, the scorekeeper would yell evil. Like, you're way off in left field here, would be evil. Now, what tends to happen when people program their minds with a lot of energetic patterns that are off the mark, off the target altogether, is that when those things are resonated into activity in them, and if they live in denial, you made me mad, you made me sad, you hurt me, then what my mind is going to do is take that evil energy in me, that energy that's off target totally in me, and build it into my brain's image of my object of attention, you. Then you show up as the demon in my life with all the evil that I'm feeling in my body. And, of course, if I'm feeling it, it's got to be mine. And that's why the forgiveness process is so important, because when I personify that evil in my brain's image of Bill over there, when I take all the evil that's resonating in me, I feel bad, I lost my job, I'm losing my prestige, people are going to think less of me. I take every energy that's off the mark, I'm not worthy, people of authority like my father aren't going to value me. Then I take all of those energetic patterns unresolved in myself, and I literally project them into my brain's image of Bill, and now Bill becomes the personification of evil. I think we can do that with demons or devils or, whatever game we want to play. And for me, where the forgiveness process understood from the Aramaic perspective becomes so important is that if I've taken that energy that is unconscious in me, that is so far off the mark as to be called in Aramaic evil, and I've made a picture of Bill out of them, I can collapse that picture, that lie that convinces me that Bill is making me feel this. And when I do that, I can bring love to that which is evil in me, which is off the mark in me, and I can heal that which is evil in me, and I'm going to be finished with it. Now, when in sleep, and as you're talking about vitality, what I hear is 20 years ago when all this was going on, the resonance of that energetic pattern in him was so powerful that his unconscious was trying through dreams to communicate it with him.
Mm-hmm.
And, it sounds like he wasn't ready, so what we're going to do is take the geographic cure instead of deal with this and go elsewhere. And I suspect that you're probably, when I think back to that last still point breathing session, and I remember the smile on Tim's face with what he resolved around one of the major rejections in his life with Dad, a new connectedness with Dad. To me, that would be a signal of a whole new level of vitality and probably the ability. So now, he's got the vitality to handle it, and that energetic pattern is opening again through a dream, communicating with him and giving him the opportunity to move through that, which, what kind of messages, if you look at the messages he did not want to receive by staying in that town, there's some of the same messages that he's been processing with Dad, and he just recently came to resolution with some of that. So my take would be, I think you're right on track. He's at the next level of vitality. He's ready to do that next piece of work.
Good, and I'm with you on that, and I want to take a detour from that to ask you again about, for instance, you say you're working with Tim Bingham, who's a healthy man, basically, who has a willingness to grow and look at things and do a worksheet. Now my question is, and it's the question of, is there a separate evil? I have a best friend whose daughter is bipolar. That's her diagnosis. She slips into these absolutely snarling. She is like
vicious.
a devil, just nastiness.
Yep.
And there is no way she could be willing to do this work. And Jacob, my grandson, who is not that bad, still is not willing to do the work, and he's still in a blaming mode. And when he's really down, he affects his father, the power person. He becomes like his father, and his father to me seemed demonic, scarily rage, demonic. And so it leads me to thinking these guys aren't willing. Where isn't it demonic to not be willing, or what's happening that we can't get a handle on this, that we can't lead them to it? We just watch and wait.
Remember that feelings are reflections of thoughts. And if I have generations of mind energy, generations of thoughts, especially reinforced in childhood with a traumatic relationship with a power person, the primary resonating energy in my mind is that of sin and evil, literally, sin being energies that are off the mark, and evil being energies that are off target altogether. The child who says, I maybe verbally directly got the message from my power person that I'm worthless and will never amount to anything, or maybe I just listened to the power person messages and came to the conclusion I'm worthless and will never amount to anything. That's evil. That's so far off the mark for a human being created out of love. And again, we can personalize it and personify it. And are there people whose minds are filled with that kind of energy? Generations and generations of, hate and fear and rage and guilt and grief and self-condemnation and things like murder and crime and rape and pillage. That's in the genes of a lot of people. Now, where I come to with that is, from a physics point of view, what I know is that nobody has ever created a flash dark. We have a flashlight. The room is totally and completely dark. I push this little button and the room lights up. Yeah. But nobody's created a flash dark. That is a little device that you push the button and it evaporates all the light from the room, because darkness is an absence. In physics, darkness is an absence. It's not a positive presence. The question I hear you asking is there a positive presence called evil? And my offering, demons, we down through history, we have a mythology of personalizing this and turning it into other people and into these demonic creatures, and people who are artists have created such horrific, portrayals of these evil creatures. But is there a positive presence called evil? My take is absolutely not. There is an absence of the presence of love. Mm-hmm. Yes. And the thought patterns and the power person patterns and the dynamics that come from the absence of active present love are horrendous. And what I've observed over the years is that people who you would say are demonic and evil, and I'll give you an example. Way back in Atlanta years ago, my partner, Dan McDougald, who was the head of judicial service agencies in Albany, Georgia, was working in the prison systems developing a course called Emotional Maturity Instruction. That became half of what together we created was the Laws of Living course. And he was working in the Atlanta prison system under the guidance of the head of the prison department, who ultimately became a judge in Albany, Georgia, named Asa D. Kelly. Next thing to a saint. This man was amazing. And he was in the prison system working with these tools with prisoners. And there was one man in the prison who, his thing, I mean, if there's the personification of evil, he was a serial killer. His thing was, I mean, he literally took joy from what Dan has shared with me in killing people, and was in prison for life for killing people, and had killed people in prison.
Wow.
And he watched Dan working with these prisoners and the recoveries that prisoners were making. Now, this guy is what the world would call pure evil. He literally enjoys killing people.
Mm-hmm.
There was a contract in that prison system put out on Dan. Guess who blocked and made sure the contract never came to fruition? This man that most people would consider to be pure evil. Now, my take is the light in Dan and the desire for Dan to support and assist people at the bottom of the ladder of our civilization resonated the light, the being, the truth in this man, and he stopped him from being murdered in the prison.
Wow.
To me, that would be an example of when, and the line in the worksheet, and this one goes back, this has been such a powerful thought in my work, in my life, goes all the way back to, let's see, kids are now 42, so they were about 4 or 5, so 35, 36 years ago, we started a course in Unity Church in Delray Beach. It still goes on today, and the first lesson that we had in that course was, when I choose love, it wakes up the love in everyone. So to me, while someone might categorize this guy who enjoys murdering people and is in prison for life for doing it, when Dan's light showed up, it turned the light on in this man, and he became his protector.
That is a fabulous story and a good...
everybody was terrified of him. Nobody would. When he said, "No contract in this prison for Dan McDougald," that was it. Dan McDougald lived, or he'd have probably been dead.
Oh my God, that's so great. That's a great story, and that is perfectly applicable here. So
to continuously,
I love it.
In the face of every disintegrated thought, every sinful and evil thought, every thought that's off the mark or off the target in us, if I keep going back and choosing love once again, choosing love, the Course talks about choose again, choose again, choose again. When I choose to bring it forward, there comes a point where it begins to or enhances the dissolution of that type web of disintegrative thoughts that blocks the light, and finally the light is able to come through.
That is a wonderful reminder. That's just perfect. Thanks.
The inclination comes to share another story that ties in with this, and you've heard us speaking of in the past about a young man who was a military trainer. He was I don't know all the military terms, but his thing was teaching people to kill people. And when he first came to a workshop, his wife brought him, dragged him kicking and screaming. And when he came into, it was actually a private home. We were doing a workshop in Fort Lauderdale. And they came early, and they were parked in the driveway, and somebody parked in front of him. And when I started to speak, he got up and walked out. Got in the car. He was ready to leave, but he was blocked in. And at the intermission, I went out, and I said, "Hey, Michael, what's happening? I thought you were going to be with us." And Michael shared with me afterward, does this guy, Ryce, not know who I am? I could kill him with a flick of a finger. And that was, his big brag when we first got to know him was that, as a military trainer, he trained people how to kill people, and he was a master at it. And Michael ended up teaching this work.
Great.
He got it. And, and the light in him turned on, and he became a powerful advocate for forgiveness.
Wonderful.
So that's where that thought, when I choose love, it wakes up the love in everyone. When I realize, how deeply, how often, how long am I going to have to do it? Well, until the next time, and then until the next time, and then until the next time, and the next time. And when I make that my default setting, sooner or later, that energetic pattern is going to become strong enough in me that it will literally energetically touch someone else and bring that forward, rather than the hostility or fear that's moving in me touching the hostility or fear that's moving in them and drawing them to do their hostility and fear behaviors in response to my hostility and fear behaviors, and doing a downward cycle. Somebody has to get big enough in a humanity where the atrocities are incalculable and unfathomable. Somebody's got to say, okay, well, I'm going to step out of that game, and I'm going to choose a different spiral. Because certainly, everybody who's decided to be depressed about what's happening in the world could easily just buy into the depressed, it's hopeless, it's helpless, look how terrible. And, there's lots of terrible around to do that with. And when you realize that millions of people have been trapped in that, who's going to be clear enough, who's going to be committed enough, who's going to be strong enough to say, and I'm going to cause the spiral to go in a different direction until the critical mass of the spiral is upward rather than downward.
Fantastic. Well, that's the best pep talk ever. So I have a new resolve. Talk about a New Year's resolution. I hadn't made one, but this is a renewal. This is great.
Well, actually, the placement of your questions, I thank you for, because it's a renewal for me. It taps me in a different way as well to, this is what it's all about. This is why we're doing this.
It's so needed, and I have screwed up badly with my grandboy Jacob. He was He's in Florida. He would call me a couple of times a day, and I was available to talk. And he went around and around and around, but he liked to talk, and I think in a way it helped. He's pre-doing the tools for sure. But
right.
I made the mistake of saying to him, Jacob, you know, you're an adult in a household where your mother is working very hard to support you with a full-time job, 3 boys, 2 of whom she's really, really worried about, and the third one she's concerned about too, because he's virtually taking care of his father, functioning as his father's therapist. This is the youngest one. I said, Jake, would you ever want to live on your own? Because Tim and I could help you get on your feet, you know, if you wanted to get your own place. He immediately thought that I was getting ready to have him thrown out of the house. He panicked. And right on the phone, I said, he redefined, which I think is what gaslighting is, he redefined what I had said to him. He said, you're trying to throw me out. You're doing this. I said, no, I'm not. But I burned my bridge, Michael. It was not a wise thing. And he got off the phone. I haven't talked to him in days. He told his mother he thought he was going to be thrown out, which is what his father would do to the boys. He'd throw them out and wouldn't let them back. And they went to camps and they went to faraway schools and all kinds of things, not as a benefit, but as a punishment. So I've burned a bridge with my grandson, and I'm thinking to myself,
a thought. That's a thought.
Yeah, that is a thought. That's a good thought.
Did you burn a bridge or did you open a door? What I hear is you've opened a door to a conversation for him to look at a power person dynamic and the way that he listens. Because what I hear you saying is his listening didn't tell him about anything you said.
Yeah.
And so to me, that sounds like an open door to, well, you know, Jacob, I noticed that you interpreted my speaking as ABC, I'm going to get you thrown out of the house, when the truth is, here's what I'm saying, and help him to build the brain cells for a different conversation. And I suspect that probably what you spoke was dealing with a power person dynamic that happened with his dad, and that's what you resonated.
Oh, yeah.
That's his next level of healing.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and remember
that's true if I had access.
Right. He won't take your calls?
No. I've written to him, and I've called him, and we do give him an allowance, but I don't want to use the allowance as leverage or punishment.
No. It's a good idea. I'm with you. Well, remember the thought in the Course that speaks about words, and we're down to the last minute and a half, so I'm just going to speak through to the end of it and let the show disconnect. But remember the passage in the Course that talks about, it would be strange if you were asked to take a teaching function and let go of the meanings of the words that the world uses, and then you were asked to use the words of the world. But the point that lesson makes is that you use the words of the world not because you believe they're true, but to prove their untruth in the language that the world listens in. And so my offering would be, and I will certainly join you and support you in, it sounds like here's an opportunity for you to interact with your grandson to assist him in recognizing how untrue his own thinking is. Now, of course, your creative genius is going to have to function there, but your creative genius is pretty awesome, so I suspect it will function well. Just defining what it is that you're about is going to be the next key to your guidance taking you there, I would say.
And there's further discussion needed, but there's no time. Thanks so much, Michael.
Great. Well, we've got tomorrow. Let's carry the conversation on. In the meantime, everybody, have the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an awesome gift to give the world, and blessings.